All right, well, welcome Anna Shilina to Shift Talking. I'm so excited to have you here. We chatted a little bit before we got on about me being a hot mess this morning, and my habits are not on point today. So I'm so excited to have you here and learn all about your new book, Habit Freedom. So let's jump in. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And just right off the bat, I love your rawness, your authenticity. I feel connected with you immediately, and we met just a few minutes ago. So I'm very, very thrilled to be here.
Yes, same. I'm honored to have you here. Tell me a little bit about your background. I of course just learned that you were raised in South Africa. Tell me how things kind of progressed from your upbringing to now being this powerhouse that you've become.
Ooh, I love this question. Powerhouse. We immigrated when I was just 6 years old from Kiev to Cape Town. So I grew up in an immigrant family, which has, if anyone's grown up in an immigrant family, they know what that means, right? The parents are really busy and emotionally unavailable, surviving all those things. And I grew up, I couldn't speak the language at all when I moved when I was 6 years old. So I had to learn English very quickly. I had to figure out a lot of things on my own because the parents could speak even less English than me at the time.
Sure.
And and one of the things that I found, my first addiction, quote unquote, was academia. And it didn't look like an addiction. It seemed like a healthy thing for a kid to do, just get A grades and win all the awards and the prizes. But what I was actually doing, which I only realized years and years, decades later, when I find myself in cycles of limiting habits with drinking and unconscious eating and doom scrolling and binging series and numbing out, was that behavior was learned in a different form when I was really young. I was learning to escape the present moment when I was very young, right? I didn't feel safe in the present moment. I didn't feel that the present moment was enjoyable, so I escaped into books. And so by the time all these other unhealthy coping mechanisms came into my reality, like alcohol, I clung to that, right? And I took to it like a fish to water. And so that is kind of like a through line from like where that happened or where that came from. And I started going to personal development seminars from the age of 18. I was lucky enough, my dad was really into personal development. So he'd fly me out to Singapore and Malaysia and the US and do all these personal development things. And I started becoming very interested in what makes people tick, what makes people feel stuck with the exact same strategy. Two people, one person will thrive and just like go off on it, and another person will just sit there with that exact same strategy and not do much with it. And so I started to study how to become a human behavior specialist at the same time as my more official studies. So I also have a degree in property studies from a university. But I was always interested in human behavior. And so after a varying career of hospitality, I had an export business at one stage, I had a security business. After all of those, I then went into consulting and coaching and being a human behavior specialist, being a mindset coach. And eventually 2 years ago, I started the Relating Academy. And as I was developing the Relating Academy, I realized that the most important relationship that we ever have is the one that we have with ourselves. And that's where Habit Freedom was born, because I'm like, well, how do we create an amazing relationship with ourselves? What's the practical, as a human behavior specialist, I want to know what's the steps. And so that's where Habit Freedom was born. And I've been lucky enough to be stuck in many limiting habits. It's been my gift and my curse. And I was also very lucky that I got to get stuck in those really dark places when I was relatively young, that I had to figure it out, right? Like I had to claw myself out of that space. And so through going through my own experiences, I really struggled with like alcohol for 7 years. I mentioned that, like unconscious eating, doom scrolling, just like numbing out. And had to figure it out, wrote a book about it, got to coach people on it. And that's how I got to being here today.
It's incredible. And there's so much there and so many different kind of branches down that tree that I'm desperate to go down. First, though, I want to highlight two things from your upbringing that you shared, right? Is that one, oftentimes because we think that they are quote unquote productive habits or addictions or these types of things, oftentimes they don't quite get the energy that they need, the life and the spotlight that they need, right? Like drinking versus academia or working out or these types of things that we tend to not recognize as problematic because they're quote unquote healthy or what we're supposed to be doing. They're things that we might idolize in our culture instead of recognizing how much they're harming us. So I love that you mentioned that even just escaping into books and academia and those types of things can still work so far against us and pull us so far away from ourselves in the same way that other less productive, less ideal things can do. The second part that I think is incredible is that you had your father to guide you to do this with. And many of us don't have that. Many of us have parents, especially of immigrant parents, who don't quite, quote unquote, believe in doing this work, don't really see the necessity of it. And so what was that like for you to have someone who not only was guiding you in this, but your own parent to really propel you forward and encourage you to do the work?
I am doubly lucky because I don't just have my dad, but I also have my mom, and they're very unique in how they guided me to exactly where I'm today. But let me give you an example with my dad. I found these old school videos, you know, those cassettes from those like old school camcorders, and
Yeah.
I translated them into like a USB file, and I watched some of them. And when we were very young, I was maybe 6, 7 years old, my dad would ask questions to my sister and I have a younger sister, and he'd ask, you know, what is love? What is life? What is God? You know, like these like very profound questions. And that actually, looking back, I'm like, of course I became a coach and a human behavior specialist and interested in all of these things because these deep, profound questions had been literally programmed into me from such a young age. And then on
Wow.
top of that, Davina, from the age of around 10 years old, the only way that we could earn pocket money, my sister and I, was to read books like Who Moved My Cheese, Millionaire Next Door, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Japanese Candlesticks.
Wow.
And so we'd create these projects, you know, like paper projects, these A3, these like big colorful papers, and we'd write out all the lessons from these books. Like I'd stick coins on some of them, if it was like the money lessons, you know, and then like the cash flow quadrant from like Rich Dad Poor Dad. And so I was very lucky that my dad was guiding in that way. He he's such an amazing teacher. He's a very challenging person per se. Like he's not, I wouldn't call him the most
Sure.
conscious human, but he had lots of very good ideas, if that makes sense. And then that was complemented with my mom, who's the most softest, incredible, gentlest, loving, accepting soul who's been through so many challenges herself. And, you know, my mom and I go to plant medicine ceremonies together, and we have our own kind of like, you know, healing bond that way. And we understand when I heal parts of me, it work, you know, goes back to her, and when she heals things, then it heals me as well. And so we're doing this like intergenerational healing with my mom as well. So I'm so lucky to have two such huge forces in my life who have guided me in their own way. My dad's motivation was very different to my mom. My dad's motivation is like, she needs to be a millionaire by the time she's 18 type of thing. What book's going to get her to read so that she's like independent,
Uh-huh.
self-sufficient, and, you know, like, let me send her to the courses and things. So he wanted like strong, independent women who knew how to fend for themselves in the world. And that was beautiful. And then, you know, the way we got to that was through these courses and books. And then my mom's approach or more intention was a lot more just, you know, loving and fluid and
Nurturing.
nurturing. That's the word. You nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. That's incredible. So many of us are, when we're doing this work, we are almost discouraged by the people in our lives, our parents, our siblings, our family, and sometimes even our closest friends or our partner, right? So the fact that you had that is so incredible and something that I envy in your ability to carry that through. And so are your parents still with us today?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I have the best
Amazing.
relationship with my parents these days. They also live in Cape Town, and they're still running their businesses and doing their things, and yeah, continue to have these nurturing and guiding relationships with them. And legitimately, I'm the luckiest woman on the planet. And also, this is not, this goes, I also need to emphasize that I grew up in a house with lots of conflict. My parents fought a lot when we were growing up. They were emotionally unavailable. I was a very attention seeking kid. Like, I would shoplift and I would do all these like naughty things, and I'd like hide the drinking and the partying. And like, there was also like, I had great parents, and also there were a lot of challenges. Witnessing how they repaired their marriage a million times over again, and that's also been such a profound and beautiful journey. And part of why I love the Relating Academy, and I founded it, is to help people with relationships, which includes a relationship with self, but in general also all relationships, because that's life. Life is habits and relationships.
Right.
That's what I've like distilled it down to. But yeah, like it's not without its challenges. And also, I'm the luckiest, and I truly believe that we choose the parents that we incarnate into. And sometimes that's a very challenging thing to accept. And that's one of the concepts I love to live by, which is like radical responsibility. And I like to stretch it even to like unreasonable responsibility. How can I take so much responsibility that is actually unreasonable? But when I started seeing my parents' dysfunction as a gift, they started to show up more and more that way.
Well, and I hear that, and here's where people would might hear your story and be like, "Oh, well, she had this. Like they showed her the ropes and they guided her and all of this." But we oftentimes forget that all of us, it's our first time living too. And it's our parents' first experience as well. And none of this is without hardship. None of this is without recognizing that we see the missteps, the missed opportunities that our parents were likely just robbed of. And that's our work that we get to, that we're fortunate enough to kind of carry through and carry on, kind of through them and with them and alongside them in these ways. So I hope no one's listening and thinking that like, oh, you just had it made. Like we know that that is absolutely not the case. What you did was take things that could have crushed you and you use that as fuel, as a foundation for you to build on top of. And that's incredible and so commendable.